2 months ago, a guy drove into my shop with a Ford that had been throwing a check engine light for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He knew it was on. He saw it every single morning when he started the truck. But the truck still accelerated fine, still got him where he needed to go. Still felt completely normal, so he did what a lot of people do. He told himself it was probably nothing serious, kept a mental note to deal with it eventually, and kept driving. By the time he pulled into my bay, I could smell the damage before I even lifted the hood. The turbo was destroyed. Not worn, not weakening destroyed. The catalytic converter was cooked beyond saving. The repair estimate I had to hand him that afternoon was over $6,000. For a code that caught 3 weeks earlier, might have been a $200 fix. That story is not unusual. I have seen versions of it more times than I can count, and every single time the conversation goes the same way. The owner looks at the estimate, looks at me, and says some version of the same thing, but the truck was driving fine. Here is the truth about modern Ford engines that the dealership is never going to sit you down and explain. The check engine light does not discriminate. It comes on for a loose gas cap. It comes on for a failing oxygen sensor. And it comes on when your timing chain is stretching toward the point of catastrophic engine failure. Every single one of those situations produces the same light on your dashboard, and 3 of them will still let your truck drive just fine for days or weeks while the damage compounds silently underneath you. Today, I am walking you through the 7 Ford engine codes you absolutely cannot afford to ignore. Not just what they mean, but what is actually happening inside your engine when they appear. What the damage looks like if you wait too long, and exactly what the repair cost gap looks like between catching it early and finding out the hard way. One of these codes, the one we're ending on, can take you from a $200 fix to an $8,000 engine rebuild, and the only thing separating those two outcomes is how quickly you act after the light comes on. Let's get into it. Subscribe CTA before we get into the list. Hit subscribe right now and turn on the bell notification. Every week on this channel, we cover real Ford engine issues, owner tips, maintenance facts, and repair knowledge that can save you serious money, the kind of information that used to require knowing the right mechanic personally. It's free, it takes 1 second, and this channel may be the best thing you ever did for your truck. Subscribe now, then let's talk about these codes. Quick note before we start, one thing worth clarifying before we get into the codes, because I know not everyone watching has done this before. When one of these faults triggers, your dashboard is not going to display P0456 or P0016 in tech. In most cases, all you are going to see is the check engine light, that amber glow on the gauge cluster. That's it. The actual fault code is stored inside the vehicle's computer, and to read it, you need to plug an OBD2 scanner into the diagnostic port located under the steering wheel on the driver's side. Once the scanner is connected, it pulls every stored code and shows you exactly what the computer flagged. A basic OBD2 scanner costs between $30 and $50 at any auto parts store, and it is honestly one of the most valuable $30 purchases you can make as a Ford owner. Some dealerships and independent shops charge between $50 and $165 just to read and interpret those codes, and you can do the same thing in your driveway in 90 seconds. When I reference a code number in this video, that is what you would see displayed on the scanner. Keep that in mind as we go through the list, and let's start with the one that fools the most owners into thinking they're safe. Code #7. P0456 EVAP small leak detected P0456 is the code that gives people false confidence. And that false confidence is exactly what makes it worth starting with. When this code appears, it means the engine computer has detected a small leak in the evaporative emission system, the sealed network of hoses, valves, and a charcoal canister that captures fuel vapors from your gas tank and routes them into the engine to be burned off rather than vented into the air. The system exists to manage fuel vapors, and when it has a leak, the computer flags it. Here is the part that makes owners shrug and move on. The truck drives completely normally. No power loss, no rough idle, no strange sounds, no performance change of any kind. The check engine light comes on, and that is the only symptom. which makes it feel like one of those minor codes that can wait. And to be fair, the most common cause of a P0456 is a loose or improperly seated gas cap. That is a $20 fix at worst. You tighten the cap, clear the code, done. So the instinct to not panic about this one is not entirely wrong. But here is where owners get themselves into trouble. A P0456 can also point to a cracked EVAP hose, a failing charcoal canister, or a faulty purge valve. These are components that manage fuel vapors in close proximity to heat sources under the hood. And fuel vapors are flammable. A small leak that gets dismissed as a probable gas cap issue and left uninvestigated is not just an emissions violation waiting to happen, it is a fire risk sitting near a hot engine. Beyond the safety concern, a small EVAP leak does not stay small. It grows. The hoses get more brittle, the crack widens, the purge valve degrades further. And now your next emissions inspection is a guaranteed failure. Your fuel system is under chronic stress, and what started as a $20 fix has become something more involved. Here's what you should do. Start with the gas cap. Make sure it's fully seated and in good condition. If the code clears and stays gone, you're done. If it comes back, and this is the part most people skip, have the EVAP system properly tested. A replacement purge valve runs $50 to $150. A charcoal canister runs $150 to $300. Both are manageable numbers when the problem is caught before it has time to compound. Do not let the mild symptoms fool you into thinking you have unlimited time. Code #6 P0101 MAF sensor performance problem P0101 is the code that costs people money twice, once when they misdiagnose it, and once when they find the actual cause after the first repair didn't fix anything. The MAF sensor mass airflow sensor is the component that measures how much air is entering the engine. The computer uses that reading to calculate exactly how much fuel to inject. When P0101 appears, it means that reading has gone outside the expected range. The sensor is not necessarily dead. It is just no longer giving the computer accurate information. The symptoms you might notice include rough idle, sluggish acceleration, noticeably worse fuel economy, delayed throttle response, and sometimes black smoke from the exhaust. The truck may still move, but it feels blunted, like performance is being rationed. Here is the mistake that makes this code expensive. Most owners hear MAF sensor and immediately order a replacement part, and sometimes the sensor itself really is the problem. But on Ford trucks, P0101 is frequently triggered by things that have nothing to do with the sensor's condition. A split intake hose, a clogged air filter, a sensor that is dirty but functionally fine and just needs cleaning, a vacuum leak somewhere in the intake system, an aftermarket intake that the computer was never calibrated for. If you replace the sensor without checking those things first, there is a real possibility you just spent money on a part that was never the problem. The code comes back, the symptoms continue, and now you are back to square one with less money and the same issue. What makes P0101 genuinely dangerous beyond the misdiagnosis trap is what happens to the engine when it keeps running on inaccurate airflow data for an extended period. The computer is adding the wrong amount of fuel relative to the actual air charge. Too much fuel sends unburned hydrocarbons into the exhaust, which hits the catalytic converter while it is operating at extreme temperatures. Too little fuel makes the engine run lean and hot. Either direction stresses the oxygen sensors, degrades combustion efficiency, and begins quietly damaging the catalytic converter through ongoing thermal abuse. MAF sensor cleaning costs almost nothing and should always be the first step. A replacement sensor runs $50 to $300 depending on the model. An intake hose is $30 to $80. But if the bad data has been running long enough to start damaging downstream components, the repair scope widens considerably. Here's what you should do. Before replacing anything, clean the MAF sensor with dedicated MAF cleaner spray available for under $10 at any parts store. Check the intake hose for cracks. Check the air filter. Look for vacuum leaks. Rule out the inexpensive causes before spending on parts. If the sensor is genuinely bad, replace it. But find the actual cause first. Code #5 P0300 random/multiple cylinder misfire. This is the code that separates the owners who pay $400 from the ones who pay $4,000. And the only difference between those two outcomes is how fast they responded to what they saw on the dashboard. P0300 means the engine computer has detected misfires occurring across multiple cylinders simultaneously. A single cylinder misfire shows up as P0301, P0302, and so on, isolating which cylinder is the problem. P0300 means it is not isolated. Multiple cylinders are misfiring, and the engine is struggling in a broad, distributed way. You will almost certainly feel this one. The engine shakes, the idle becomes rough and irregular, acceleration feels fragmented and broken up, fuel economy drops sharply. The truck may feel like it is working hard while producing very little. Here is the detail that every Ford owner needs to understand about P0300. Pay attention to how the check engine light is behaving. If the light is on solid, the misfire has been detected. If the light is flashing, actively pulsing while you drive, the misfire is happening right now at a rate the computer has determined is causing immediate damage. A flashing check engine light on a Ford is not a cautionary note. It is an urgent warning to stop driving the vehicle. Not tomorrow, not after this errand. Now, the reason the flashing light represents a genuine emergency comes down to what a misfire actually does inside the engine. Every time a cylinder misfires, that cylinder fails to burn its fuel charge properly. Raw, unburned fuel gets pushed out into the exhaust stream. That fuel arrives at the catalytic converter, a component already operating at temperatures between 800 and 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on load. The unburned fuel ignites inside the converter, generating a thermal spike the converter was never designed to absorb. The internal substrate begins to melt and break down. The converter overheats, gets destroyed, and a misfire that might have been fixed for a few $100s becomes a repair bill that includes a catalytic converter replacement at $1,200 or more, on top of whatever caused the misfire originally. The causes of P0300 run a wide spectrum: fouled or worn spark plugs, failed ignition coils, dirty fuel injectors, low fuel pressure, vacuum leaks, carbon buildup on the intake valves, low compression from wear. In the best case, you are looking at spark plugs and coils $150 to $500. In the worst case, with catalytic converter damage already done, you are looking at well over $2,000. Here's what you should do. If the check engine light is flashing, pull over immediately and do not continue driving. If the light is on solid and you are experiencing rough running, get it scanned today, not this week. Today, identify the cause before the misfire gets the chance to finish off the catalytic converter. Code #4 P0420/P0430 catalyst system efficiency below threshold P0420 and P0430 are the codes that generate the most expensive misdiagnoses in Ford repair. And they do it because the obvious interpretation, the catalytic converter is bad, replace it is wrong often enough to cost owners thousands of dollars in unnecessary parts. P0420 means the catalytic converter on bank 1 is not cleaning exhaust gases at the efficiency the computer expects. P0430 means the same thing on bank 2. On V8 Ford engines like the 5.0 Coyote, it is not uncommon to see both codes appear together. Here is the diagnosis error that gets people. These codes do not necessarily mean the converter is worn out. In many cases, the converter is not the original problem at all. It is the victim of something else that went unaddressed. A failing oxygen sensor upstream or downstream of the converter can produce readings that make a functional converter appear inefficient. A small exhaust leak near a sensor can corrupt the data entirely. And critically, an engine problem that was never properly fixed, a chronic misfire, an oil burning issue, coolant entering the combustion chamber can destroy a catalytic converter and still be actively running while you replace it, which means the new converter gets subjected to the same conditions that destroyed the old one. And now you are paying for a second replacement within a year. An OM catalytic converter for an F-150 runs between $500 and $2,500 depending on the engine configuration. Oxygen sensors run $40 to $150 each. The cost of a thorough diagnosis before committing to a converter replacement is a fraction of what a wrong guess costs. Here's what you should do before authorizing a catalytic converter replacement. Insist on a root cause diagnosis. Have the oxygen sensors tested and verified. Have the exhaust checked for leaks near the sensors. Make sure there is no active misfire or oil burning issue still running through the engine. Fix the cause first. If the converter is genuinely worn, replace it knowing the engine going into it is clean. That is the only version of this repair that makes financial sense. Code HASH3. P0299 turbo underboost condition if you drive a 2.7 or 3.5 EcoBoost F-150. This code demands your immediate attention every single time it appears. No exceptions. No let me monitor it for a few days. The moment P0299 shows up, you start diagnosing it. P0299 means turbo underboost. The engine expected a certain level of boost pressure from the turbocharger and received significantly less than it should have. The symptoms are hard to miss on an EcoBoost. The truck feels weak, labored, like it is working twice as hard to deliver half the performance. Under acceleration, it might feel like the power just falls off a cliff. There may be a faint hissing or whistling sound from under the hood. In some cases, the truck will drop into a reduced power mode on its own as a protective measure. And here is the first thing to understand about P0299 that changes how you approach it. The turbo itself is not always the problem. A split intercooler hose, a loose charge pipe connection, a stuck or sluggish wastegate, a vacuum leak. A bypass valve issue, any of these can produce a P0299 without the turbocharger having any damage at all. A boost leak repair might cost $100 to $300. A wastegate repair might run $200 to $500. These are completely manageable numbers that restore full performance and prevent any further damage. The reason urgency matters here is what happens if the diagnosis gets delayed and the turbocharger itself is actually the problem. A turbocharger operates on one critical dependency: clean, pressurized oil flowing continuously through the bearing assembly. When oil supply is compromised from neglected oil changes that have produced sludge, from running low on oil, from a failing oil feed line, the turbo bearings are operating without adequate lubrication. The shaft begins to wear unevenly. It starts to wobble at speed. The turbine blades make contact with the housing, and once that process begins, it is not a matter of if the turbo fails, it is a matter of how soon. Worse, a failing turbo that disintegrates does not just fail in place. Metal fragments from the turbine assembly can travel downstream into the engine intake. Now the conversation has shifted from turbo replacement to potential engine damage on top of it. Turbo replacement on a 3.5 EcoBoost runs $1,500 to $3,500 at a shop. If engine damage accompanies it, that number climbs further. Here's what you should do. Scan the code immediately. Look for boost leaks at the intercooler hoses and charge pipes first. These are the most common causes and the cheapest to fix. Check your oil level and oil condition. If a boost leak is not the obvious culprit, get it to a qualified shop before the next long drive. The difference between a $200 hose fix and a $3,000 turbo replacement is purely a matter of how quickly you investigated. Code #2 P0521 engine oil pressure sensor / switch range performance P0521 is the most deceptive code on this entire list. And it is deceptive in a very specific, very dangerous way. This code means the oil pressure sensor is reading outside its expected operating range too high, too low, or fluctuating erratically in a way the computer flags as abnormal. The check engine light comes on, sometimes alongside the oil pressure warning light, and in many cases the truck continues running without any obvious symptoms at all. So most owners land on the most reassuring interpretation available to them: it is probably just a bad sensor. The sensor is lying, everything is actually fine, I will swap it out and move on. And to be completely fair, sometimes that interpretation is correct. A replacement oil pressure sensor costs $20 to $100. If the sensor was the problem, that is the entire repair. But here is the part you cannot afford to gamble with, because the stakes of being wrong are catastrophic. P0521 can also mean genuinely low oil pressure, not a malfunctioning sensor falsely reporting a problem, actual, real, inadequate oil pressure inside the engine right now, and every minute that engine runs with insufficient oil pressure. Components that depend entirely on that pressure for their survival are experiencing accelerated wear. Cam phasers on Ford EcoBoost engines are hydraulically actuated by oil pressure. When oil pressure is insufficient, the phasers cannot hold proper timing. Timing chain tensioners depend on oil pressure to maintain correct chain tension. Turbocharger bearings are lubricated by pressurized oil from the engine. Every system that relies on oil pressure starts degrading the moment that pressure falls below specification, and the engine will keep running through all of it, giving you very little indication that anything is wrong until the damage is already done. Cam phaser damage runs $800 to $2,500. Turbo bearing failure from oil starvation adds $1,500 to $3,500 on top of that. Ignore the underlying oil pressure problem long enough, and you are having a conversation about full engine replacement. Here's what you should do tonight, not this weekend. Tonight, check the oil level on the dipstick. Check the color and consistency. Black sludge or a milky appearance both indicate serious problems beyond just an oil change being overdue. Think about when the last oil change was performed. Start the engine and listen carefully for any ticking, knocking, or rattling that wasn't there before. If the oil level is correct, the oil looks normal, and the engine sounds healthy. A sensor replacement is a reasonable first step. But do not drive on P0521 for days while debating it. The cost of being wrong is not recoverable. Code #1 P0016 crankshaft AN camshaft correlation error. This is the most serious code on this list. It is the one where the difference between acting fast and waiting too long is measured in thousands of dollars. And it is the one that announces itself most quietly, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous. P0016 means the engine computer has determined that the crankshaft and camshaft are no longer in the positional relationship they are supposed to be in. In plain terms, the internal timing of the engine is off. The precise synchronization between the rotating assembly and the valve train the relationship that makes every combustion event happen at exactly the right millisecond has drifted outside acceptable limits. The symptoms in the early stages are subtle enough that many owners convince themselves nothing is seriously wrong. A rattle on cold startup that disappears after the engine warms up. Hard starts, particularly on cold mornings. Rough idle that smooths out once the engine is fully warm. A noticeable loss of power and sluggish response from a stop. Fuel economy that has been quietly declining. The cold start rattle is the symptom that needs to be treated as an alarm, not a curiosity. Many owners hear it, notice it goes away as the engine warms, and conclude the problem resolved itself. It did not resolve itself. The rattle went quiet because the engine's oil pressure built up enough to partially compensate for whatever is failing. The underlying cause is still there. The damage is still accumulating. The silence is not improvement, it is a temporary pause. On EcoBoost engines and many modern Ford V8s, P0016 typically traces back to one of three areas. A variable valve timing solenoid that has failed or is sticking. This controls how oil pressure is applied to advance or retard cam timing. And when it malfunctions, the cam position drifts. A worn or failing cam phaser that can no longer maintain accurate position under load. Or a timing chain that is stretched enough through high mileage or inadequate oil maintenance that it allows the crankshaft and camshaft positions to separate beyond the tolerance the computer will accept. The timing chain is the component that keeps the entire engine synchronized. It ensures the valves open and close in precise coordination with piston movement. When the chain stretches and allows timing to drift, efficiency drops, power drops, and the engine works harder for less output. When the chain stretches far enough to skip a tooth on the sprocket a single jump, and timing the valve and piston positions can collide. In an interference engine, that collision is not a minor incident. Valves bend. Pistons sustain damage. What was a timing chain problem becomes an engine that requires partial or complete rebuilding. A variable valve timing solenoid replacement runs $200 to $400. Cam phaser replacement runs $600 to $1,500. A full timing chain job with labor runs $1,500 to $3,500. If the engine has experienced valve contact from a chain that jumped, repair costs escalate to $8,000 or beyond, and in severe cases the engine is simply replaced rather than rebuilt. The entire cost difference between the $200 solenoid and the $8,000 engine repair is time. The owners who get to the inexpensive version of this repair are the ones who scanned the code, heard the cold start rattle, and got it diagnosed within days. The owners who reach the catastrophic version are the ones who decided to monitor it or assumed that because the rattle went away the situation was under control. Here's what you should do. If P016 is on your scanner, especially if you have been hearing a cold start rattle, noticing hard starts in the morning, or feeling a power loss that you have been explaining away, get it to a qualified shop this week. Not eventually. This week. Tell them about the cold start rattle specifically. Have the VVT solenoid tested as the first and cheapest possibility. If the solenoid is good, have the cam phasers and timing chain inspected. The window between the inexpensive fix and the catastrophic one narrows every day the engine keeps running in this condition. P016 is not a code you monitor and revisit in a few weeks. It is a code you act on immediately. Outro every single code on this list started as something manageable. The $30 gas cap, the $100 sensor, the $200 solenoid. Small, affordable, straightforward repairs that any shop can handle in a few hours. What turns them into $6,000 repair estimates is one thing and one thing only: time spent telling yourself that because the truck still drives, everything is probably okay. Modern Ford engines are extraordinarily capable. They are also extraordinarily unforgiving when the warnings they send you get ignored. The check engine light is not decoration. It is the most direct communication your truck knows how to have with you, and it is always worth listening to. So if your Ford has a check engine light on right now, here is what I want you to do. Don't panic. But don't ignore it either. Get a $30 OBD2 scanner, pull the code, write it down, and find out what you're actually dealing with. The cost of knowing is $30. The cost of not knowing can be measured in thousands. If this video helped you understand your Ford better, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next one. Now here's my question, and I want your honest answer in the comments. Which of these situations best describes where you are right now? Choose one. A. I have a check engine light on right now that I've been ignoring because the truck still drives fine, and after watching this video, I'm genuinely concerned I might be the guy in your opening story. I'm scanning it today. B. I already dealt with one of these codes, and I paid the expensive version of the repair because I waited too long. I want to tell you exactly what it cost me so other Ford owners see this comment and don't make the same mistake. C. My truck is clean right now, but I had no idea these codes could cause this kind of cascading damage. I'm buying an OBD2 scanner this week and keeping it in the truck permanently going forward. Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. And if your Ford is currently throwing a code that isn't on this list and you want to know what it means, drop the code number and your engine in the comments. Let's figure it out together. Thanks for watching.